This will be part 2 of my reading of Snowglobe. Chapter 2. This was your mother's, Pa says, handing me a slim, leather-bound notebook. Perhaps I should have given it to you earlier, but I wanted to be sure the time was right. He peers at me. He's a little short-sighted, but he never remembers to wear his glasses. Mostly they parked in his hair. I'm sorry about today. I know, he says, pulling out a chair opposite mine and stealing a chip from my plate. It's not good to be throwing boys around classrooms. I'm sure there was a reason. He holds up his hands as I begin to protest, but it won't be good enough. Clem. I've been trying to talk to you for a while now about your magic. You can't ignore it anymore. When did you try? Last Sunday, I'm sure. And a few weeks before that as well, he says absently. I know I'm not around enough, Clem. I'm sorry you don't have more. Perhaps the book will help in some other way. His voice trails off, and the tormented look creeps back over his face. It's very difficult to be angry with Pa when he looks like he's already feeling about as bad as a person can bear to feel. It's fine, I say. Thank you for the book. He looks from me to the book. It was never far from her. The notebook is made of leaf green pitted leather, and it warms quickly in my hands. The cover is worn. The gold-trimmed pages within flutter softly as I look through it. My mother's handwriting is small and spidery. I trace my fingers over the words, feel the way they were pressed into the page. She did that, my mother. It's about as close as I've ever got to her for more than 10 years. She never let anyone take photos of her. She said it pinched her soul. I'll leave you to it, Pa says, loitering by the door. But go careful, there's some big stuff in there. Why did she go? I look at him. I don't look at him when I ask it. I just keep my eyes on the book. Not because of you, he says. So then what was it because of? I don't know, he says. I wish I did, Clem. One day perhaps we'll find out. She is the space between us. Sometimes we don't know how to talk about her. The first page is a pencil sketch of a tall, thin house that stands alone in a valley. Shadows crowd in on every side, and it feels like there are dangers there, hiding in scribbled lines just out of sight. But the house itself is bright beneath a crescent moon. Balconies just from first-floor windows. A tiny bridge curves between two towers, high over the huge doorway, and a dozen steps lead down into ornate gardens, where flowers bloom pale against the darkness. It's a beautiful picture, and I can see the places where she lingered. The paper shiny with pencil strokes and scarred where the shadows are thickest. On the next page, her name, Callisto Paradis, and then pages and pages of the close-set writing, scrambled together to make the most of the paper, there are rhymes and wards against curses between fragments of thought and intricate little sketches of strange creatures. I flick through the pages again and again, but I don't focus on any one page. The fact that I have this book in my hands is too big. I read snatches, tiny clues into what she was like when she was here, and each one is wondrous, but also devastating, because I never really knew her. I don't remember her voice or her smell. I don't know how she looks when she is happy or sad. Now I guess I know a little bit. I know how she put words together, how she felt about someone called Ganymede, and her potions of warding off the common cold. It still isn't much. Most of the words are strangely obscured. They seem to blur when I look closely. After a while, I pull back from the book with a huff and tuck it into the pocket of my jacket. I shout out to Pa that I'm going for a walk. He calls back from his study, and I picture him at his old wooden desk, the narrow-faced brass clock ticking on the mantelpiece, his brow furrowed as he tries to read some tiny text without his glasses. Then I bang out the front door and begin to prowl the winding streets of our ancient town, tucking my chin into my scarf as the cold November air flowers into my lungs. It's a thing I do when I'm restless. I walk. Pa used to hate it. I think he worried I wouldn't come back, but I couldn't help myself. I was never too late home, and so he got used to it. Tonight I head down into the very center of town, where the cobbles of the market square are slick beneath my feet and shadows cling beneath the old clock tower. The streets are narrow and twisty, and the sky overhead is star-spattered ink. I come here often. There's warmth in the streetlights, and the shabby crenellated rooftops make me think of old Christmas cards. It's a small town, and most people know each other. They still talk about my mother. They say how special she was. I smile and nod when they tell me, but it feels like a club I wasn't allowed into. I never got to see it for myself. I turn a corner and the air whistles out of my chest. Rising up behind the clock tower, taller, grander, shining like the moon itself, is the house. The one my mother sketched, with the balconies and the tiny sparkling bridge and the wide marble steps that sweep up to a massive ornate porch. I take a step back, look around me wildly. Familiar rooftops spin over my head as I turn. I have walked these streets 1,000 times. I know their nooks and crannies, and where they rise and fall. I know the way they smell in the morning when the baker opens her shop, and in the evening when the pubs are closing. I know the post box on the corner, the bench beside it, dedicated to Mr. A. Knowles, who used to run the bookshop. I collapse onto Mr. Knowles' bench now and curl my fingers around the wooden slats, take a breath of freezing air, and look up. There is the house. It was never there before. Chapter 3. The steps are smooth as glass, reflecting the lines of the house above. There's not a single smudge on them, not a winter-dried leaf. Nothing. They loom over me, and I don't mean to be here at all. But I can't walk away now. What if I came back tomorrow and it was gone? What if it's only an illusion? I tread on the first steps, heartbeat thudding in my ears, just waiting for my foot to fall through, for this whole new world to collapse around me, like some kind of dream. I hold my breath, bring my other foot up to join it, and stand there for a long moment. It holds. I look down. My boot is out of place, scuffed and muddy, and when I move it up the next one, I can see that I've left a footprint, a real footprint, on a real step. A shudder rolls up my spine as I see that to the other side of the steps the gardens have been left to grow wild, thick brambles winding up the dark branches of trees. If I slip or fall, I'll stand in a tangle of thorns. I keep going, and it gets colder, until my breath is steaming and my knees are shaking. It seems to take hours, and all the time the wilderness to either side seems to be growing. There was a garden here once. My mother's sketch showed it clearly. There were flowers in cultivated rows. They were lovely. I stumbled then to get to the top. My head has been so full of the steps and the brambles that I forgot to look up as I was going. The porch opens up around me, built on pale marble pillars, every inch carved with flowers and trees and tiny winged figures that wink in the moonlight. The door is set back, sheltered from the elements. It's as wide as a car, made of stark white wood. I step forward, rest my hand against it, wondering if I dare to knock. The food is soft and warm, and it gives slightly beneath my touch, like skin. I whip my hand away with a tiny shriek. The door swings open. I always thought I had a good imagination. When we played rounders at school, I'd be out in the field missing balls because in my mind I'd be riding in a starlit unicorn or having a heroic battle with a storm giant about to lay siege to the town. I imagined what it would feel like to live in a world where fairies were real, to have a mother, to be popular like Jago. Never in 1,000 years could I have imagined a place like this. It isn't just the way it looks, it's the way it breathes. The air moves, it sings with the song of 1,000 worlds, with snow globes, each one churned up as if it's just been shaken. They ring out, they ring out from their shelves on either side of the enormous marble hallway, stretching in front of me, and they swing from the ceiling on copper chains. They're small as bubbles at the top of the shelves and nestled into heavy iron cradles at the bottom, full of feathers, glitter, and flecks of gold falling over silent scenes trapped in glass. Bridges and mountains, sculpted domes, and underwater caves, all half lost in a swirling tide, each with its own tiny human figure. The door slams shut behind me, and a shadow flickers at the edge of my vision, twisting up a central staircase with a curved banister. The shudder I've been repressing worms its way up my spine. I ignore it and head for the stairs, moving carefully between rows of gleaming globes. The air is musty, as it hasn't breathed, as if it hasn't breathed enough, and there are cobwebs in all the corners, tangled around old, flickering chandeliers and snaking over picture rails. I should leave, right now. I turn on my heel and hover for a minute, 2, 3, looking from the door to the staircase. Then I think of my mother's sketch and of the book in my pocket, and is the closest I have ever come to her, except being here in this house, her house, the fact that I stumbled upon it tonight, after everything that's happened today, that must mean something. I grit my teeth and turn again, my boots squeaking on the polished marble floor, and head up the stairs. The banister is smooth and worn. I imagine her coming up here. Her hands are mine. Her hands where mine are now. Her feet lingering on the same worn places. I wonder if she played hide and seek in all the empty spaces as a child. My eyes are on stocks for signs of her. Photos, height marks on the wall, but there aren't any. This is no ordinary house. I already knew she was no ordinary person. Pa rarely speaks about her, and when she does, it's always from so far away. His mournful look chases every word until we're both desperate to drop it. But there were clues in all the things he told me. She crocheted scarves with silk and then gave them away because she didn't need them. She laughed like a storybook witch, sang like a bird, shouted like a steam train, and nobody stood a chance against her when she set her mind to something. She rarely spoke about her family or where she came from, but Pa knew there was magic there. It was bright and dark and full of hope, but there were other, more twisting things that gave her nightmares sometimes. She didn't use her magic around him, said it was best left behind, and that was what they argued about. He could see how much it cost her not to breathe the air. She didn't want me to breathe. She didn't want me to breathe it either, but she left before. I took my first steps, so she never got to tell me that herself. Pa told me she'd have worried when he began to see traces of it in the things I did. He taught me to count through the moments when it got close, so that's what I've been doing. That's what I did this morning with Shago. I counted and tried to pretend the magic Her magic was all in my imagination, only it wasn't. Pa's been trying to tell me for a while that it would only grow, but I didn't want to hear. The stairs led to a wide corridor where arched windows looked out on to narrow balconies and the tangled brambles of the neglected garden. Snow globes hang from silver chains there, clustered together like small universes. I walk around them, watching as wild storms flurry within, and in a smaller, darker corridor, globes the size of a human head were set into alcoves in the walls. They glow strangely, ancient yellow glass, making rugged landscapes look ominous. A black iron staircase looms at one end of the corridor, a ghostly light filtering down. Hurry. I back up a couple of steps at the sound of small hushed voices. She'll find you. Be quick. The room perches at the top of the house beneath a huge dome roof that makes all the sounds echo. Stars wink overhead between smoky, shifting clouds, and it's hard to make out much detail in the miniature worlds that line the room on shelves of twisted metal. They flounder in swashing tides of bright, swirling snow, black sands, and deep blue seas that glimmer with tiny darting fish. Who is it? Is it her? Is it Ganymede? No, 'tis a new face come to see us, and she has magic. Run, you fool, you'll be lost as we are. The ghost-like voices rustle and boom and fade to nothing. My skin prickles as I venture further into the room. There is danger here. I don't know where it comes from, that sense, but it's as real as the taste of copper in my mouth. I peer into the nearest globe to find a solitary tree, its golden leaves in a great mound at the base of its trunk. They swirl up as I watch, so I move to another, a half-ruined lighthouse perched at the edge of a cliff, beads of ice gathered in every crevice. The next is a circus top with a single tiger prowling around its perimeter. I stare at that until the tiger lifts its head and roars at me, tiny stars whooshing up around its paws. Clementine? I follow the sound and see a boy at the bottom of the at the steep snow-covered hill, one hand resting on the side of an enormous golden dog. The dog whines as I get close, and the boy turns to it, soothing it with mumbled words. Was that you? I ask, wincing as my hushed voice ricochets around the glass-domed roof. The boy turns back to face me. Don't you recognize me? I stare at him for long minutes, racking my brain. It's hard to see clearly through the glass, and his features are so tiny. Who are you? Dylan. Snow falls harder all around him as he stares at me, a strange half-hope in his dark eyes. He curls his hands deeper into the dog's coat and shivers. And then I know him. Dylan, who helped me up after the netball smacked like ice into the side of my face. Dylan, who shivered beside me at the bus stop on so many bitter mornings, who talked to me but only when it suited him, only when his best friend Jago wasn't in sight. Dylan was sitting beside Jago earlier today, watching silently as he poked me in the small of my back. Chapter 4. What are you doing here? I watched him for a long time, trying to convince the logical part of my mind that it really is him, miniaturized in a snow globe. He steps closer to the glass, leaving the dog to wander over thin grass that pokes through the snow, and puts his hands against it. Clementine, is that really you? He sounds desperate, not like the Dylan I know, who's quick to smile and easy with words. He tricks me every day, says hi, picks up my bag, then it goes sliding across the bus floor. Then we got through those green gates, and he gives me a wave and goes about his day with Jago, not even meeting my eye. How did he end up here? Please tell me you can hear me, he whispers. I can hear you. He stares at me for a long moment, then presses his forehead against the glass. Dylan, how long has it been? I perch on the arm of one of the old chairs, so my eyes are on level with the globe. The material is frayed and bobbly. I rub my palms into it until it hurts, just so I know this is real. How long since I was out there? He looks up, clenches his hands into fists, as if he'll pound at the glass. As if that's just what he's been doing all this time. I saw you today. Have they stopped looking? How long has it been, Clem? It was today, Dylan. I saw you at school this morning. It was a lifetime ago, he shouts, striking at the glass between us. Then when he's finished pounding and he's sitting on the frozen ground, I ask, what happened? The dog shuffles around him, nudging against his neck every so often. How did you end up in here? He doesn't say anything. He puts his hand up to the dog and hooks his fingers into its coat, hauling himself up. I've never seen anybody look so weary. Dylan, how do I get you out? What happened? I don't know. I was walking along the street. It was misty, and it got colder and colder, and then there was a hill, and I was here. With the dog? Helios. He came after. I don't know how it works. He just appeared one day. One day? But you've only been here for one day, Dylan. No, he says. I don't know how long it's been. But it isn't just a day. Weeks or months. I can feel time passing, but I can't tell properly because there's no night here. The sky doesn't change except when the storms come. He leans into Helios with another shiver and stares at me. The hill rises behind him, now shifting along its surface as the wind blows. On the top of the slope is a mean little house made of weathered wood with a tiny window at the top and a huge stable door at the bottom. There's nothing comforting about it. Is that where you live? I've tried to reach the house, but the hill is too steep, too icy. I can't get up there. Snow begins to fall, and he tucks his chin into his jacket, and it gathers in his brown hair, catching on his eyebrows. Are you really here? He asks, his voice muffled. I nod. I'll get you out. He shakes his head, and then his face darkens, and the globes around him begin to swirl. The snow falls harder. Helios barks, and then silence. Utter silence. All around, Dylan and Helios frozen into position, his face turned from mine so I can't see his expression. A bony hand claps onto my shoulder. What are you doing here? Asks a dry voice that sounds as if it hasn't spoken for 1,000 years. Turn, child. Let me see you. How did you get in? I swallow and turn, and hand still on my shoulder. Against the pale starlight of the room, she is a shadow, a collection of shapes that make no sense. Light, she snaps, drawing away from me, her voice swelling and filling the room. The globes begin to glow, their light a silver haze that glows until the shadows are gone. We stare at each other for the longest, strangest time. She is tall and angular. Her features softened only by an enormous mane of silver hair. Some of it is matted, some of it plaited. Some of it is twisted into a bun on top of her head. Her long robe seems to be a collection of materials she threw together in a hurry. Lace trails from the sleeves. The pewter bodice looks almost like armor, and the collar is made of pale speckled feathers. The air around her vibrates as though she's in the center of a heat blaze. She's unearthly, beautiful, alien, and thoroughly chilling. Ganymede, screams the voice from the snow globes. Who are you? I whisper. Who is Ganymede, and what does she have to do with my mother? There must be a link. Her name was in my mother's book, and this is the house my mother drew. This place rings with magic, and brings with magic that I've been denying for so long. Who am I? She shrieks. Who are you? Run, run, run. The air simmers between us, and her fingers twitch as her eyes narrow. Any moment now she's going to grab me. Run. And I run, and I don't look back. I don't linger. On the globes I pass, though tiny figures put their hands up against the glass as avalanches thunder around them. Though the whole house seems to rumble with my footsteps, I just run. Alright, I'm gonna stop there and pick up there next time.